Madam Chair. Bill 27 Renewable Electricity Act. I move that Bill 27 Renewable Electricity Act be amended in Section 12 as it follows. A, by renumerating its Section 12, subsection 1, by adding the following after subsection 1. Payments from the General Revenue Fund under subsection 1 shall not exceed 10% of the total revenue of the Climate Change and Emissions Management Fund under the Climate Change Emissions Management Act for that fiscal year. Again, thank you, Madam Chair. It's almost midnight, and it is a pleasure to represent the constituents of Calgary Southeast and Albertans as a whole and be a member in this House. Today I propose an amendment to Bill 27 under the Renewable Electricity Act. I'd like to first say that the aim of this bill is not entirely without merit. There is certainly room in Alberta for the development of more renewable electricity options, and certainly that's what I believe. I also believe that we are blessed and privileged in Alberta with the abundance of wind and solar in this province, as anyone who has seen that has lived in Alberta can certainly attest to that. So it's the idea behind this bill that is certainly one that I can understand. But I don't think that we're feeling our duty as legislators with the duty to protect the interests of Albertans if we allow this bill to pass in its present form. Because at this point, there's still some rather glaring risks to the taxpayer contained in this bill. Leaving aside the fact that there are too many unknown aspects of this legislation, too much that will be decided in regulation and not without supervision of this House, there are some other issues as well. And the issue that I'd like to discuss today, and the issue that my amendment is designed to address, is essentially the issue of liability. That's to say, who is going to be responsible if things don't turn out as this government planned. We know that money being handed out to renewable electricity companies is supposed to be coming out of the government's climate change fund. So all the money that they are taking from Albertans through their carbon tax, for example, is supposed to be able to support this program. But the government is hedging their bets there. They're making an allowance in this bill that isn't enough. They're making an allowance in this bill that if there isn't enough money, of taxpayer money, they can start dipping into general revenue to make up the difference. And I think we can hazard a pretty good guess why the government thinks this is necessary. Because they have all these programs where funding is supposed to come from the carbon tax. And I think it's pretty clear that all of these promises they are making, all the money they are handing out, is going to exceed the money in their climate change fund. They certainly don't want to admit this to Albertans, but they're going to have to pay for a lot of these programs straight out of general revenue. That isn't necessarily a bad thing, and there's some legitimate reasons why this makes sense to have a safety valve like that built into the financing of certain programs. But the problem is that once you're tapped into the general revenue, there's almost no limit on how much the taxpayer can be on the hook for. We've seen this in other jurisdictions under other renewable and green energy products that can be successful, but we've also seen some of these projects also become colossal failures. And that is why I believe we need to guard against this. So the amendment I am bringing forward will put a limit on how much money can be drawn from the general revenue in these programs. If we cap the amount that can be drawn from general revenue, we can protect the taxpayer from assuming this huge liability if things go wrong. So we're proposing that the payments from the general revenue shall not exceed a tenth of the total revenue of the Climate Change and Emissions Management Fund. This will give the government some flexibility in dealing with shortfalls, but it will also protect the taxpayer from having to shoulder cost overruns. So I hope this amendment will find support from this House. Thanks for your time.